The Reef Therapy Podcast is powered by ICP Analysis. We know our corals need certain elements to survive, reproduce, grow, and color up. And you might be asking yourself why you want to know about these trace elements. Well, the answer is growth and color of your coral. ICP Analysis will test over 50 elements down to parts per trillion. These tests can also be used to see if there's anything undesirable in your aquarium as well. It's super easy. Register your aquarium on the ICP Analysis app, fill your sample, place it back in the box, slap on the included postage label, and have results 1 to 3 days after it's received. More at icpanalysis.com. This episode of Reef Therapy was recorded at Aquashella, Daytona.
Hey, Reef Builders. Welcome to episode number 85. Also, fish streamers as well of the Reef Therapy Podcast. We're in Aquashella, Daytona. This place is gigantic.
Yes.
It's huge.
It is the biggest venue yet.
And security is on lock at this place. I showed up at 6 o'clock and they were like, nah, you're going to have to wait. You can't get in here.
Did they try to put you at the line? They were like, yeah, go stand over here.
Yeah, stand in here with all the early people. No. It's all the aquascapers who want to get in here and actually do something. We've got some of the best in the business today. Obviously, Evie here, Kevin with Top Shelf Aquatics. Julian Sprung is going to join us as well from Two Little Fishies. I'm going to treat this as kind of like a panel discussion this morning based on the state of the hobby as it is right now. Just kind of a little check-in with some industry professionals. So first, I want to see how everybody's doing. So, Evie, if you want to start, how are things going? I know you have a lot to do with the setup of this, and
it's going very well. It's been very smooth. For the most part, getting here earlier in the week, seeing everything get unloaded, bring it all out of the crates, start, seeing all of the drapery and everything go up. It's like magic. You can go and do something that you've got to do on the other side of the venue and come back, and it's almost like changed completely by the time you make it back over. And it seems like you might have been gone for 30 minutes, but it really was more like 3 hours.
Yeah.
Because you get tied up doing other things. But this has gone very, very well. We're very excited about it.
How many days were you all setting up?
So we start getting access like roughly around Wednesday to start doing like tape offs and things of that nature. And then throughout the course of that, it's like just kind of like little sections start kind of developing. Like we're getting stages built. We're making sure that we've got electricity brought down everywhere that it needs to go.
Yeah.
Even yesterday, they added a few more pieces of electricity that were dropped down from the ceiling because we were like, hey, we think we've got to have some more in here.
We need more, yeah.
Yeah, we've been at some shows where breakers are popping and things.
Yeah, that's always a good
It's a
time.
nightmare. Anytime the lights get ramped up or a heater kicks on,
Yeah,
all of a sudden
it's usually the
everything shuts
heaters.
down. So,
The heater's usually the guilty part.
Wi-Fi has been a challenge at some of these shows too.
Mhm.
So, hopefully that's no issue with everything we got going on here.
Yeah,
It looks
think
like
everything's
it's kind
flowing.
of streamlined and getting smoother each time, right?
Yep, it is. It's definitely, everyone really knows where they're supposed to go, it seems now, whenever they walk through the door. And so it just gets more and more seamless as we go every single show.
And I know you've got the Ladies Take Over Reef Therapy Live coming up today.
I do, yeah. Our first one ever. So it's our premiere episode, I guess you'd say.
What are you guys going to talk about?
I think for the most part, it's going to be a lot of introduction into who we all are. So that way it's more of like a familiarity thing, like talk about, what we all do roughly within the industry, and then just kind of hang out. Because I feel like if we do that more from like a live perspective and doing something in a facility like this, it kind of helps everyone go, okay, that's the premiere episode. If I want to watch something that's more educational, like bam, episode 2. Either you want to like hang out with those girls from the get-go and get to know us all, or it's like, no, I want to know exactly what they're talking about today.
Yeah.
Who is going to be part of that?
So it's going to be Sarah Stevens from the Butterfly Pavilion. Then we've got Jen Weiner from New Wave Aquaria, which is up in Minnesota. You'll have me, and then you'll have Chelsea, who actually helps us put together the aqua crib here at Aquashella. And she owns her own business doing maintenance and maintaining a wide variety of reef tanks. She has a lot of experience with builds.
Yeah.
And Chelsea from other, competitions here within Aquashella.
Yeah. She beat me at the last
She
skate off.
did. She beat
I'm gonna have
Kevin.
to give her some crap about that.
Yeah, for sure.
So Kevin, I think, a lot of people, they show up to these things and they wonder, how do you get coral across the country? In this case, it's not too far of a drive for you guys, but how are you getting coral across the country to all these shows? What's the setup like? You guys have it down to a science, I'm sure.
We do, but it's always nerve-wracking. We have some heavy-duty coolers that we had custom acrylic racks and cradles, essentially sort of like what you would see in a travel container, like the Building and Obsessions ones, but a custom insert for these heavy-duty coolers to really keep them temperature controlled and water sealed. So the racks will actually go in and stack 3-4 high. All the corals have the locking rubber, so they can't really come off. And all in all, it's pretty successful. I mean, especially being the fact that we usually bring aquacultured stuff and more frags than larger pieces. Don't have a lot of stuff sliming up in there and really fouling up the water. And then we always discard the water in the coolers and put clean new water at the setup. So minimal loss, though we even have come to the airport, I think once or twice, and found our coolers upside down. But even in that case, there was only a few things we had to remount when we got to the show with a little glue and whatnot. But all in all, pretty smooth.
Very good. Very good. Julian Sprung.
We did. We had
arrived.
Julian come in here.
Hi, hey everybody.
How Julian, how's the show gone for you so far? I mean, obviously we've just started, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, the show really opens today, but yeah, we had a late night setup. There was a concurrent show with Central Pet, and that it's good to have same time and venue, but that sort of interfered on the setup. Yeah, walking around the show late yesterday evening, I see it looks spectacular. There's a lot of wonderful exhibitions that I look forward to seeing once they have the lights on and everything's going. Yeah.
Well, we're kind of talking about in this particular podcast, talking about the state of the hobby currently. Yes. And Kevin, I kind of want to start with your perspective on this. Being the owner of a large coral farm and retail space, do you agree that it's kind of leveled off a bit from 2020 to 2022? If so, what are some of the contributing factors from an owner standpoint?
I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, there's a certain demographic, I think, that has slowed down a little bit, and we are driven a bit more by some larger tank installations and things like that. I mean, generally our numbers still increase year over year, but yeah, a little less of the foot traffic and a lot of the people with small tanks and things like that, looking for more basic things. I think it has a bit more to more high-end collector mentality and that sort of thing. But, I think the hobby is still always growing, and, there's so much more out there. Tanks, saltwater aquariums are just easier than ever to maintain and keep the livestock alive. And, a lot of quality aquaculturists out there too that are doing an excellent job, keeping high quality, healthy animals that are here and that acclimate well to your aquarium. So I think everything's still rolling pretty well. And yeah, I mean, there's always ebbs and flows and changes and trends of what people are into and that kind of thing. So, that's something that you always kind of have to have a bit of a finger on the pulse. It's like one year zoas are in, next year acros are the big thing. Next thing you know, it's mushrooms. Then anemones got really big for a while there. And yeah, it's just always new stuff. I mean, even macroalgae tanks, I think, could be another thing that could get really big here coming up. So I'm interested to see where it goes.
Yeah, Julian, I want to kick it over to you.
Yeah.
You're the OG in the hobby, at least in this circle right here. You've seen the ups and downs. You've been through these. What's something that's remained consistent through all these ebbs and flows for you?
For me, or for the
hobby in general, for you?
What's remained consistent? It's a deep question. Passion, I think, is what drives this whole thing. Exasperation over algae, the inability to control algae. That's actually, if you peel apart the superficial stuff, that's what drives the entire industry. It never goes away.
Yeah.
We all talk about the latest, piece of equipment and this controller and that supplement and this, and it all comes down to, how do I get rid of this algae? Oh, simple, just do this. So that has never changed. I'm trying to look at this tongue in cheek, but there's truth in what I'm saying to you. I love your response there, because that was so true, because the flavor of the month does always rotate. It's fashion. It's totally, completely fashion. And so think about the whole clothing and department store industry has its ups and downs exactly the same way. The department stores that stock up on something that's hot now but not hot 6 months from now, they suffer the pain of the inventory that won't move. So if you still have gold torch corals, while everybody else does, it might be a problem. But I think that in the long run, promoting systems that are easier to maintain will help with the retention of people. Complexity is valuable only in the sense that you might use it to learn something that you didn't know, or for the case of a larger system, having the ability to control it in a way that is easier. But for the average hobbyist in smaller systems, simpler is always the best way. And you do want to keep them, as well as inspire new people not to be afraid to step in and become a part of the hobby.
The pests is such a great observation, because that's, they proliferate, whether that be flatworms or green hair algae, aptasia, whatever, and that immediately turns people off. That first obstacle.
Hair algae is its own. Hair algae, cyanobacteria, is just something that's always going to be there, and I see how it can be lumped together with pests, but it's kind of a different thing. It's it's just sort of a part of the hobby, especially for beginners, but it affects even the experts. I guess the experts, at least the ones who are diehard and staying with it long term, you see hair algae or bryopsis or cyanobacteria here and there, you don't lose your mind. Okay, this is what I need to do, and it's going to go away. Whereas a newbie sees it and think, well, this is it. I'm done. I don't know how to control this. All my water parameters are perfect. They told me this is what I need to do, and I still have this problem. This doesn't make sense. Somebody needs to get that message out and say, okay, this happens. It will go away. Follow this. It won't be overnight. It's a biological system where it's not your swimming pool where you can pour in chlorine and everything goes away that way. We have all the same things available to us on the chemistry side as well as the biological side. We can use herbivores, different controls, but it takes time to achieve that level of balance so that you can have that, tank of the month pristine thing that you're looking to do. And I would also add that one thing that is never going to change is that a true hobbyist is always going to feel angst when looking at his or her own system. There's always something that's not exactly right. Okay, there might be a day or two where you look and you go, oh my God, everything just looks perfect. Everything's great. Well, that usually precedes something dying. But especially, if there's something you're focused on, oh my God, look at that. It's so beautiful. Next day, forget it. But in any case, there's always some angst, and that, just like the algae thing, if you open the hood, that's a lot of the engine that drives it, because that motivates you to try something new. Which then supports your dealer and your manufacturer. It's kind of a funny psychological element. We talk about biology and chemistry, but there's really a whole emotional aspect to our
Just want to switch gears really quick. Evie, you're in local fish stores on the weekly.
Yes.
What's the sentiment from a local fish store owner at this point?
There are a lot of, it really depends on the area of the United States that they are in. I'm seeing a lot of stores that if they, did a lot with their time coming out of the pandemic with doing updates to their stores, doing anything in regards to maybe adding onto their store, adding another fish wall, adding another bay of coral. The stores that did things like that, they really helped their local community with support. And hey, we're still growing. We want you to grow. Come in and see what we've been busy doing. Any store that really was able to take advantage of that type of situation, they have really become just such a leader in their town, in their little city, that have done something to help bring in more customers, furthering education. That's been a really big deal with the stores because their employees were able to kind of slow down a little bit. They've gotten a couple more years of education under their belt. That really helps customers. It helps further the hobby in general, because I believe that over the last couple of years, education has become a massive base for this, because there's so much available out there and there's so many different avenues in which you can do it. But I like to recommend definitely getting good with your LFS, create a good relationship with whoever the owner is, whoever you like to have advise you, and find your favorite influencer, find your favorite, person that you followed for many years, like Julian. Get with them. Yes, get with them. See the things that they say, because there's education everywhere, and it's so easy to access now, and it's so important for the hobby to keep the longevity of it going.
Yeah. Kevin and Julian, you had also mentioned this, like the trend of corals. And I remember asking Chris Meckley this one time, and he all but ripped my head off for the question. But it's more so, like you said, it's like a fashion trend. It's weird. It's almost like you never knew about the weeping willow sarcophyte. You never knew about that until Jake posted up about it. And then all of a sudden, everybody wants to see it. Or the weird Echinopora that, is over there. It's nothing. There's not a whole lot that's attractive about that coral, right? But it's cool. It's cool. It's unique, and that I think is really awesome.
It's an Echinopora that has the branching form, something like an Acropora.
Yeah.
So it fills the space in that way. It doesn't really put out long sweepers like other Echinoporas. Not that I've seen yet, at least, but it's a pretty coral that you don't really see. There are similar shaped ones, for example, from Pectinia, that you also never see.
Yeah.
These branchy forms that provide, it can be a contrast to the colorful sticks, the different acros that we have. I think the Cyphastria decadia, which similarly is, Cyphastria as a genus is an encrusting or massive, and then you have this one that's shaped like an acro. You have, myself included, people who are, hoarders of that little niche in the hobby that like these little,
like the little weird
corals.
Yeah.
And Jake, was one of these people.
Yeah.
And it, was so great to share that love of these unusual corals.
So, Kevin, do you think that there's any other factors that weigh heavy into what that fashionable coral is?
Well, I think, with social media these days and, a lot of the stuff people are seeing, it can be just something new, really nice tanks that people see that kind of show off something that hasn't really been done before. And I think that can kind of drive trends. Sometimes it has to do with, well, for example, like, when Indo got shut down as far as importation, I mean, that's when torches just went crazy and everyone was doing a lot of the, different stuff with that, where it was always trying to get the hot collection of that stuff. And then when that opened, they flooded in, and then it just got even bigger. But then I think that's kind of dying down a little bit. You're always going to see, I think with beginners coming in though, they're going to try out a lot of simpler things that are always going to be in style. I mean, I think sometimes I even talk to my crew, and they're all hobbyists. So it's like, yeah, they can almost have this negative attitude towards something like a star polyp, like, you don't want that, it grows like a weed. But, that's a coral that I think has a place in most people's aquarium that really adds a lot of color and movement. And,
Yeah,
you just have to
totally.
know how to put it in your aquascape. So, I think there's always stuff that will be a staple there. But, yeah, all in all, I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, I've seen some pretty wild Gonapora tanks.
Yeah.
Lately that's been getting huge. And just the amount of colors for people who are, I think, more experienced collectors who've kind of seen all that. That's where, let's say, they're finding new areas of collection, and they just got stuff that you haven't seen before. I mean, just the variety and health of the Ganis, and then I think the nutrition that you can provide to them in captivity has gotten to the point where they're much easier to maintain, which has driven that trend as well. So that's something that's really been growing.
Is it all about the manganese
For
Ganiopora? For Ganis? Is that
yeah.
proven? Like we've decided that's the thing? Okay.
Yeah, that's key and critical to them being able to adapt to our artificial light regime. It's an element that's part of the enzyme they use to deal with photooxidation. And it's important for all corals, but for some reason, I mean, nobody really knows why it's so key for Ganiopora. But that's true. Plus, as you mentioned, Kevin, the foods, feeding them helps, promote growth as it does for other corals. But having a base availability of supplementation of manganese makes it easier. I think, carrying on with what you said, it's great to see that increased interest in Ganiopora, but any coral that becomes fashionable, a key is that it has a unique appearance. Another is that it's fraggable and that you can cultivate it. I love that you mentioned star polyp and things like that. I would say that, one of the banes of, almost to the level of Aptasia, Xenia. There's so many varieties of Xenia and Xeniids. I could see that, just like macroalgae aquariums, I could see that becoming a thing, fashionable. I've never not loved Xenia. I mean, if you're trying to grow an SPS tank and it gets in your tank, it can be a problem because it will overgrow and kill the SPS corals. But, in its own special display, who can beat pulse corals? And there's many varieties, just like, we were talking about the weeping willow sarcophyte. And there's all these different types of Xeniids. And diving in Indonesia, just last week, that was just one of the pleasures to just go over these beds in the shallows and even some deeper water ones and watch them. It's wonderful that we can see that mesmerizing thing in our own aquariums at home.
I was going to wait to ask you this, but you're leading me there.
Yeah.
You guys did a tribute dive for Jake last week. Can you tell us how that went? Did you guys see anything cool?
So just as background for anybody who's, maybe not aware, of course, that Jake Adams was on a flight on his way to Indonesia to see the dive sites that we ended up going to the past 2 weeks. He passed away en route, and he was on his way to do these dive trips with Vincent Chalias. And after Jake passed, Vincent called up a number of Jake's close friends and said, hey, I would like to do this dive trip with you and, commemorate Jake's life and explore these reefs that he was about to see. And, just share that with you so that he could be there in spirit through your eyes. And we did that. The experience was marvelous. Jake's brother Luke was there with us. At times it was, it's bittersweet and a little strange because, there are times that Luke really looks a lot like Jake. He's not a twin, and Behaviorally, he's completely different. But there are times, that we were there and, I would just look at him and it was, a little bit strange, but wonderful to share that with him. And with everybody else, the dives were magnificent. Weather was perfect. The corals, I've got thousands of photos to sort through. I haven't had a chance to even do that yet. I'm just back. You talk about Goniopora. There's a Goniopora that I saw there verifying that it's a real thing. I knew about it. A friend, Colin Ford, many of you know Colin, has it growing in one of his systems, and he showed it to me, and all I can do looking at it was like, what is that? And I thought it was a one-off, but we found it there. It is a real thing, and it's growing. Imagine a Goniopora that grows like Leptocerus, thin plates.
Oh, nice.
Oh.
Forming scrolls, and it's a Goniopora.
Wow.
It's there in Indonesia. Just I don't know whether it's a distinct species or whether it's a known species that under particular environmental conditions takes this form. It's really hard to tell because when you have described existing species and you see something that has similarities to it, there's a psychological tendency to shoehorn it and say, well, that is this. But that doesn't necessarily fit reality. Scientists will look at that and they'll use the CF to compare it to an existing species. I'm not sure what it was that we were seeing, but I took a lot of pictures of it. And that was, one of the cool things one of a million cool things we saw there.
You got some good footage of that one?
I have good footage of it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I'll have to share that. It was just one of those cool things. We also saw, it was on my bucket list of things to see, the elegance coral, Catallophilia. There is a variety of elegance coral that's quite common in the hobby. Now, it's the typical stripy green mantle with the purple tips that people frag a lot. And I have seen pictures of that, forming fairly large fields. And we dove on basically a section that was just solid. It was a reef of that. So it went on and on and on and on.
I saw some of that video. It's stunning.
And that it was stunning and wonderful to see, and to imagine that, you have basically an old colony with clones. It breaks apart. The skeleton breaks fairly easy in this type of elegance coral. And then we saw it elsewhere, and it's identical. So that was pretty fascinating to me. It was sort of a mystery, knowing that there's this very fraggable, hardy variety. I wasn't sure whether maybe that was coming from only one location or what. And we saw it in a few locations, and they all look the same. So it's seems to be a variety, maybe a distinct species of Catallophilia. And
very cool.
They're hardy in captivity. They don't suffer this condition that affects some of the other varieties that are more colorful, more different.
Yeah, that's very cool. You guys got to do that.
Yeah, we got to see it, and that sort of since now I know some things that.
And I know that Vincent had said that there was maybe a spawning event that happened just before you guys arrived.
Yeah, we didn't see that, but he was looking. I think it was a species of Montipora.
Yeah,
and it occurred at the right time for spawning, but the conditions were surprising. It was rather cool water. That was another surprising thing for me. I've been diving for decades, and I've certainly encountered cold upwelling events. But at a lot of the reef sites that we went to, it was quite common that once you got down below 50 feet, there was a good chance that you were going to get hit in the face with a current that was going to make you scream. It was so damn cold. I should have had my wetsuit with me, and I did not. And you're in water initially 82, 83 degrees, which is very comfortable. And then suddenly 74, 75 degree water hits you, and Oh yeah, it takes your breath away. You know it's coming because there's a difference in the density, and suddenly the water starts to get a little blurry, and then it comes as a current, and it's that ice water bath. So something to think about. That's where we would see the trachophilia and the acanthophilia, in deeper water, and it was in most cases, and also some cinerinas there. It was in that place that gets hit with that cold water. I don't know how often, whether it's just seasonal. I really don't know, but we were seeing it this time of year. I've seen, trachophilia and cinerina in the Solomon Islands in habitats that I never saw the cold water where I was there, but certainly where we were in Sulawesi, that was on a daily basis something they were exposed to.
There was no visible response from the coral at all.
Corals looked real happy.
Straight up.
And
no,
the fish
no
too. Imagine
nothing.
the fish, going through those temperature swings.
getting that,
it was
shock.
really
Oh
interesting.
God, and they're, just, it's fine.
Should we be shooting cold water
I'm
currents through our
not making
tanks?
any recommendations. I think
That'll
in
be a tough one to manage.
practical experience, that's a good way to make sick fish. And I don't know what the corals would do, but there they are. It sort of throws a wrench into the whole question. I mean, this goes back to the early days of reef keeping. There was always what's the ideal temperature, right? And so you had the academic look. Ron Shimmick was talking about, well, the average temperature on reefs and these regions where the highest diversity is. This is just a whole other way of looking at it. Sure, you have surface temperature, but then the corals are at different depths, and you do have these upwellings, and they're not rare. So, what does that mean?
Well, awesome that you guys got to do that.
Yeah.
I look forward to the video and the photos and all that in the future. But it's fun to go from the ocean to the hobbyists to the tank. Obviously, Evie, you're around the country also talking to some of the most enthusiastic reef keepers you've done a bunch of videos for reef builders at this point. What are the streets saying? What are the enthusiastic hobbyists saying about the hobby right now?
I think a lot of people right now are excited about, there's been a lot of stuff that's been discovered, especially different color variations of things. Everybody, they get into like their little fashionable zones where they're like, okay, I have like 50 zoanthids, but I found 5 colors I don't have. And then you start to see the obsession grow, and then they'll move into the next trend, right? So now it's like, okay, we got bounce mushrooms. Now we've got, okay, well, this one has the orange bubbles, but I just saw one that has pink or red bubbles.
Yeah.
Now they got to have that one. So I think that as there's so much more availability everywhere, like Kevin's website is an example, they have such a wide variety. It's easy for you to sit there and want to collect and kind of get obsessive over specific pieces. And I see a lot of that happening. And I think it's becoming a little trendy where you're also experiencing hobbyists get multiple tanks, and then they'll kind of dedicate their obsessions into different tanks.
It's a syndrome.
It is, yeah. We just all kind of get sucked into it.
Yeah.
That's really the right way to do it too. Trying to put all your eggs in one basket, it's just, you're not likely to succeed because these things,
and you run out of real estate
very quickly. Yeah.
Kevin, is there any data that you guys can see, like from just a website, like search engine point of view, to kind of know what's coming, or maybe
who's the it girl? Who's the it girl coming up?
Yeah.
Oh, if he told you that, right?
Yeah.
It's Xenia because
It might
Julia
be
just talked about Xenia.
yeah.
We joke about that, but we do sell a ton of Xenia. That's always been a staple and a very popular one. But I would say a lot of the search trends have been, going more towards the LPS and softies. Zoas are definitely accelerating a lot more, but it may be thrown off a little bit just because we've been personally focusing on our collection more and trying to expand that as well. So I don't know if that necessarily carries over fully, but yeah, I mean, it's gravitated a little away from acros. That was definitely one area that we were focusing more on. So we're always trying to bring in new things. Me personally, I've been getting into a lot of different plate coral propagation of different species, trying out new things, even some of the non-typical fragging types that you typically wouldn't even mess with. I've had success cutting some of those. I've collected, even if I go to a wholesaler's and let's say we're getting some stuff, I'll say, hey, can I get these skeletons from you? And we'll, chuck them underneath some of the frag racks and see if anything, comes about from that. And I found a lot of the plates that do tend to reproduce from the dead skeletons also are very easy to frag, even if those aren't those typical species. So, there's one, we may have some videos on social media that it was interesting. It kind of piqued my interest. Russell from Ocean's Blend had been propagating this strain for years and years and years. And he gave me one, grew it into a massive sized individual colony, and then brought it to the farm, and we kind of intentionally killed it off. And now that thing's just covered with little babies popping up. And once I cut those babies from the skeleton, they grow rapidly. They're super healthy. I can actually refrag those ones, sometimes even, not just in half, but into quarters. I just picked up a plate from Meckley not too long ago that had kind of naturally formed with multiple mouths. Now, I don't know if that was just something with the way it had gotten damaged or was growing, but I just sliced that into little pizza pie shaped sections, and they've all been surviving and doing really well. So that's something we're getting more and more into.
I could see
for
that.
Me personally,
really,
we're
really
always looking
blowing
to try new things from a propagation standpoint. So, big coral farm, always adding diversity, and hopefully that'll be a trend that we can contribute to driving and growing in the future, where it's not just, hey, I'm going to buy this one piece and drop it in the tank from the wild. We can actually have a diverse, hardy collection of those things that have hopefully been in captivity for years and years.
I have one of those plates in my tank now.
Yeah.
Which one did you get again?
It's the red one.
Okay, yeah, the Diablo Diceras. Yeah. That one does very, very well. That one's an easy fragger.
Yeah.
We'll have to get you one of those. We call it the Funky Fungia. That was the one that I originally got from Russell as well. That's a pretty one. Yeah.
Is it Cycloceras as well?
Yeah. The Dioceras has been synonymized with Cycloceras, so yeah, they're all Cycloceras.
They're all Cycloceras. Yeah.
Right, the Dioceras. Didn't they actually change that?
Yeah, it's Cycloceras.
Yeah.
Now.
What, Fragilis? Or?
Yeah, correct. I love those corals, and conceptually, there, that whole process of farming them is not so different from Corallimorpharia, mushroom anemones. When you think about it, they just happen to have a skeleton in them, but they reproduce and grow really quickly, and they're, for the most part, compatible. So a hobbyist who is a hoarder and looking to have all the different plates, you can have that. They can be all up against each other. At least in my experience, I haven't seen any negative interactions among them. They have so many different colors and varieties that all you need is the right bottom habitat for them. So yeah, I could see that being a trend. I would love to see
Another
that
trend, calling it out.
Yeah.
Well, I started. We fragged my first scolie the other day.
Yeah.
That's another one that I've heard more and more people, tinkering around with as well, and acanthophilia, and and all sorts of different stuff. So it'd be interesting to see where that goes, and
that needs
how
to
much
be
success
needs to be done.
Yeah,
because,
especially since it's harder and harder to.
It's not just harder and harder to get them. They're just not common.
Yeah.
And the hobby, since they're beautiful, the hobby has a demand for them. And it's a coral where the harvest of them really could have an impact on wild populations, unlike most other corals where you can't even measure. Our impact is so small on, single polyp, large, relatively slow growing corals like that. We could be affecting their wild populations, and that's not something we really want to support. So farming, whether it's through fragging or inspiring the corals to spawn, which has also been worked on lately.
Frag
That's the
Scully
right-
about 2 years ago, and it's still
pretty small.
Yeah, they are the slow growers for sure.
Right. Yeah, it seems in the wild they don't grow quite as slowly as we see in our aquariums, so that must be a food situation.
Yeah,
But-
you spot feed yours often.
Yeah, I mean it once it rounds out
Yeah,
and you get the you can feed it again. It'll still
Yes.
the feeding tentacles will still come out when it's halved.
right.
But it's just once it rounds out, it's just so slow. It's just like the
It-
slowest thing. And I know from a farming standpoint, that's not the best. That's not
Yeah.
ideal.
Yeah.
But if that's what we have to do to keep it in the hobby, then
That's
Right.
kind of where we're at. It's more experimentation for when we do get to the time where they will
Yeah.
be less and less readily available. That may be the only way that this will exist in our hobby and the industry here in captivity. So, definitely just trying to lay the groundwork on some of that stuff and tinker around with new things. And, maybe there'll be new techniques and different dips and maybe certain traces that will be found that can accelerate the healing and growth of these things as well. So
Right.
who knows?
yeah. We've got about 5 minutes left. I have one more question for Julian specifically. We had talked to Sarah Stevens on the Reef Therapy podcast about a month ago about the Florida Reef Track.
Yeah.
And she told us a story about how they asked you for a 5-gallon bucket of aminos.
Right.
Can you tell us about that story?
Yeah, it was sort of was an odd afternoon. There I was doing a blend of Accuracy One. We make the synthetic seawater mix, and I get a phone call, and I usually ignore my phone while I'm doing that because I don't want the distractions. But I know Sarah, and I took the call, and she said that somebody was coming down and sorry to bother you, but it's an emergency. We need this Acro Power in the 5-gallon, which we do. We produce that. And we have some corals that we need to treat. And I thought, she's making a mistake. She must mean revive. And I said, don't you mean revive? You're doing a bath. And she said, no, we're using Acro Power, and it's saving these corals. And all I can tell you is that first of all, I was stunned. I'd never heard of anybody doing that. And I have yet to have a follow-up from her to explain to me how did you go about doing that, and can you show me your data, what had been your baths, your observations and all, because that's an unexpected thing.
Yeah.
I was sure she was mistaken. Anyway, we arranged it and they got it, and I imagine that helped them rescue some corals. But I don't have a protocol. I don't know exactly how she was doing it and what made them think to try that.
Yeah, I think they were doing.
She'll be here today,
Yeah.
so
Right.
you'll be able to get your update.
They were doing. From what I remember from the conversation, they were doing 15-minute baths
Yeah.
daily on
Yeah.
the corals that they were triaging,
Yes.
and seemed to help them, which I think
Right.
is something
It's
that
fascinating.
I think from a commercial standpoint, obviously you're dealing with wild coral here,
Yeah.
but how can we transition that into the hobby if
Yeah.
we've got alien corals in our tanks?
Yeah, I mean, what it pointed to was that somehow a nutritional state was helping the coral fight whatever it is they were fighting. That's not something I've ever, observed in the scientific literature. Of course, corals feeding in the wild is essential to their health, but specifically saying, okay, amino acids can have that positive effect. I've never seen anything about it.
That's cool.
It's new.
It's just huge. If you're saying that, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, I've never tried that in a bath. I mean, it is
Yeah.
something in our hospital tank. We do
Yeah.
try to, add a lot more
We need to hear
nutritional
back
benefit there.
from Sarah to understand
Yeah.
what.
Yeah.
You need to ask
Yes.
the ladies
yes,
take over
for sure.
about
yeah.
all that.
Yes.
I'll have to
we
check
will.
out that, and see
Yeah.
if it's something we can incorporate.
I'd be happy to help if I knew more about what she was doing. So
That was another thing. We were even
Yeah.
thinking about potentially starting zooxanthellae culture to potentially aid in recovery on some of our corals as well, and
Right.
just offer as something else that we sell to our customers too. So
that's
that'd
an
be
excellent idea.
maybe another project that we get into in the next 6 months or so.
Right. And you could offer different clads, different type, of zooxanthellae, Symbiode, ACA, right? Yeah, they're different types, and they have different effects on coral health. For example, the studies that were done by NOAA recently on healthy corals in Biscayne Bay around the port of Miami, one of the aspects of researching those corals was looking at what their symbionts were. And I think it was like a shining beacon light that pointed out that they had this, I think it's clad D. It's a symbiont that is non-native to the Caribbean. It's actually an Indo-Pacific zooxanthellae is in these corals near the port of Miami, presumably transported there by ballast water. You're near the port, and here these corals with that clad are thriving in conditions where it wouldn't be expected. And the same species of coral out on the reef where the water is clear and nutrient poor and all are dying. They're not thriving, and they don't have that zooxanthellae. What a strange circumstance,
Yeah.
So you bring up cultivating zooxanthellae. It's a good idea. Perhaps dosing the right clads could help corals recover. Corals that are having a problem with disease.
We'll see where we go with that,
Yeah.
and maybe in a few months we may have to discuss more on that.
Right.
I love this hobby because of this type of conversation that happens where
100%.
there's still so much we don't know.
Right.
Oh yeah. And there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
Even in little segments that cover very vast subject matter.
Yeah.
There is so much.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I wish that we had another 2 hours with you guys so we could just sit here and talk, but I know you got to get to your booth.
Right.
You got to go hobnob and all that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I got to get to my booth too.
Okay, so are you selling mangroves?
I do have some mangroves
Okay.
here. Yeah.
And Kevin has lots of coral.
Yeah.
Lots of coral. Yep. We're loaded up over here.
That's
We're
awesome.
doing the mysteries again too, so we'll have the spin wheel prize where you potentially pay $20 to $40 and win a piece that's worth over $1,000. So we'll
awesome.
have a handful of that stuff. So it's gonna be fun.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I do want to thank you guys for taking time to be on today.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Aquashella Daytona, this is the first year here. The venue's awesome. Can't wait for people this is all before our doors open, so nobody's in here yet. But if you've got any questions for Julian, for Kevin, for Evie, for me, go ahead and leave those in the comments section below, and we'll catch you in the next one. All right.
Thank you guys.
See you guys.